When my son told me that I wouldn't be welcome at his house for Christmas, I didn't argue. I didn't shout, or plead, or even ask why. I just smiled, got in my car, and made one phone call, the kind that changes everything. By the new year, I had their mortgage payments canceled. But back then, sitting on my son's leather couch under his 12-foot Christmas tree, I didn't know yet that I was about to reclaim my dignity. I just knew something in me had broken. I could make my famous turkey this year, I said, trying to sound casual, sinking a little deeper into that couch I'd helped him buy. The one with the sage stuffing your mother used to love. Remember how she said it was better than her grandmother's? The words hung between us, mixing with the scent of those vanilla candles Isabella loved, candles I'd paid for. Michael shifted beside me, his wedding ring catching the light. His posture changed, shoulders pulled inward, jaw tight. That was the first warning sign. "Dad," he began, his voice low, "unfortunately, you won't be welcome here for Christmas this year." It felt like someone had struck me across the chest. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. "Why wouldn't I be welcome?" Michael didn't meet my eyes. He stared at the marble coffee table, another thing I'd bought when Isabella decided their old one wasn't sophisticated enough. "Isabella's parents are coming," he said finally. "They'd prefer if you weren't here." They'd prefer. Two words that hit harder than any insult. "It's just easier this way. Dad, you know how her family is about traditions. They have their own way of doing things." His voice got smaller with every word. I looked around the living room, the silk curtains I'd paid for when Isabella wanted privacy. The hardwood floors I'd financed with my second mortgage. The crown molding that had maxed out my credit card. Every inch of this place carried my fingerprints. My sacrifices. "Their own way," I repeated slowly. "And what way is that, Michael?" He flinched. "Dad, please don't make this harder than it has to be." Through the kitchen archway, I could see Isabella's new KitchenAid mixer, $2,000 of my money. Used maybe twice. "Where will I spend Christmas then?" I asked softly. He swallowed hard. "Maybe you could visit Aunt Rosa. Or, we could do something the weekend after." The weekend after. Like Christmas was just another appointment that could be rescheduled when it was convenient. I stood up. My knees ached. 8 years of working overtime so he could have a better life. "I see," I said. "Dad, wait," he called. But I was already moving toward the door, past the family photos on the wall where my face grew smaller and smaller in each frame. Past the coat closet that held Isabella's $1,000 jackets. My hand rested on the cold metal of the doorknob. "Tell Isabella's parents," I said quietly. "Feliz Navidad." The December air hit my face like a slap as I stepped outside. Behind me, I heard Michael call my name once. Then the soft click of the door closing. Final. Absolute. I sat in my truck, the engine off, watching the glow of Christmas lights in windows that weren't mine. Houses full of laughter, warmth, welcome. My phone buzzed. Probably Michael. Trying to patch things up with empty words. I didn't answer. I turned the key and drove into the dark. The streets of South Hills were familiar, every corner a reminder of who I used to be. The man who believed that family meant everything. The man who'd give his last dollar to see his son smile. That man was a fool. At the red light on 29th and Grand, I saw a young father loading Christmas gifts into his SUV. His kids pressed their faces against the glass, excitement fogging the window. Once, that had been Michael and me. Before Isabella. Before I became nothing more than a walking ATM with inconvenient emotions. The numbers began to roll through my mind like a broken slot machine. $2,800 a month. 5 years. $140. Money Maria and I had saved for retirement. Gone. I gripped the steering wheel tighter as the light turned green. On 5th Street stood the bank where I'd refinanced my house, our house. Maria's and mine. Just to help Michael buy his dream home. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Flores?" the loan officer had asked me. "You're putting a lot at risk for someone else's investment." Someone else's investment. Not my son's future. Not my family's security. Someone else's investment. He had been right. I passed Lincoln Street, Where 2 years ago I'd taken a second mortgage after Michael lost his job. Just temporary, Dad, he'd said, until I get back on my feet. Isabella had stood behind him, designer purse on her shoulder, nodding like a queen approving a subject's sacrifice. My desperation had been worth nothing to them. When I pulled into my driveway, the cracked concrete greeted me like an old wound. The porch light flickered, another repair I couldn't afford. Inside, the silence felt heavier than usual. Without Maria's laughter, the house was just four walls of echoes. My phone rang. Isabella's name flashed on the screen. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Dennis," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "I heard about the little misunderstanding with Michael." "Misunderstanding?" I repeated. "You have to understand, my parents are very traditional. They expect a certain atmosphere during the holidays." "And what atmosphere is that, Isabella?" A pause. I could hear shopping bags rustling in the background. "Well, they're not used to your kind of cooking. All that spicy Mexican food and loud music. And, frankly, Dennis, they're educated people. They expect conversations about current events, literature, art, you know." Her words sliced through the quiet like knives. 8 years I'd swallowed insults for Michael's sake. 8 years pretending not to notice her eyes when she looked at me, the hired help who'd accidentally wandered into the family. "My kind of cooking," I said evenly. "You mean the food you ate every Sunday for 3 years when money was tight? The tamales you said reminded you of your grandmother?" "That was different," she snapped. "We were appreciative then, but now, with my parents. Now with your parents, you can't have the Mexican peasant embarrassing you at your fancy dinner table." I finished for her. She gasped. "Don't be dramatic, Dennis. This isn't about race, it's about class. My father graduated summa cum laude. My mother speaks 4 languages. What would you contribute to the conversation? Stories about laying tile?" I felt my blood burn, but my voice stayed calm. "I built a business from nothing after Maria died. I employed 50 people. I've paid more in taxes than your father made in his best year. Money isn't everything, Dennis. Breeding matters, education matters, and frankly, Maria understood her place better than you understand yours." That was the line she should never have crossed. "What did you just say about my wife?" I whispered. "Oh, please, she was a house cleaner who got lucky. At least she knew when to stay quiet." I didn't shout. I didn't swear. I just said, quietly, "This conversation is over." She laughed lightly. "You can't just." "We're done," I said, and hung up. The phone screen went black. The silence after her voice felt like oxygen. I stood there for a long moment, then walked to my desk and pulled out a manila folder filled with old bank statements and mortgage papers. 5 years of bleeding myself dry for people who didn't deserve a drop. It was time to stop the bleeding. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, Isabella's words echoed in my head. My parents are educated people. Breeding matters. Breeding. Like I was some kind of stray dog they'd reluctantly let inside their spotless suburban home. I lay there in the dark, staring at the cracked ceiling Maria used to complain about. "You'll fix it someday," she'd said with that half smile of hers. I'd promised her I would, but I never did, because every dollar that could have gone to paint, repairs, or comfort had gone to them. To Michael and Isabella. To a house where I wasn't even welcome for Christmas. When dawn came, I didn't feel tired, I felt empty. But in that emptiness, something new was growing, a quiet clarity. The kind that shows up after years of swallowing your pride. I made coffee. The cheap kind I'd been drinking since Maria died, bitter, thin, and just enough to keep you alive. The kitchen felt colder than usual. Maybe it wasn't the temperature. Maybe it was the realization that I'd built an entire life around people who saw me as a wallet, not a father. I walked to the desk in the corner of the room, the one covered in old bills and bank envelopes. It had been years since I'd really looked at them. 5 years of automatic transfers. Scheduled payments, just until we get on our feet. 5 years of self-inflicted wounds. I opened the top drawer and pulled out the manila folder. The same one I'd touched last night after hanging up on Isabella. Inside were the ghosts of my generosity. Mortgage statements. Credit card bills. Receipts for home improvements I'd never lived to enjoy. All neatly organized, a ledger of my own foolishness. I sat down and began to add. $2,800 every month. For 5 years. $33,600 a year. By the third year, I'd stopped buying new clothes. By the fourth, I'd switched to discount groceries. By the fifth, I'd started skipping dinners. The calculator on my desk blinked as if in disbelief. $143,400. That number hit me harder than Isabella's insults ever could. Maria's life insurance money. Our retirement fund. The college savings we dreamed of setting aside for grandchildren, the ones I'd probably never meet. All gone. Poured into a house where my presence was now considered embarrassing. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the total. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel grief. I felt anger. But not the kind that burns and fades. This anger was clean, sharp, the kind that could build something new. I reached for my phone. The woman on the line had a bright, professional voice. "Thank you for calling First Spokane Credit Union. My name is Jennifer. How can I assist you today?" "I need to cancel an automatic transfer," I said. My tone was calm, but inside, I was trembling, not from fear, but from release. "Of course," she replied. "Can I have your account number, please?" I gave her the details. And soon I heard the soft clicking of keys. "I see the transfer you're referring to, Mr. Flores. $2,800 monthly to Wells Fargo. Account ending in 7,423. How long have you been making this transfer?" 5 years, I said. The words tasted like ash. "And you'd like to cancel it effective immediately?" I looked around my kitchen, at the leaky window. The peeling paint. The old refrigerator that groaned with every cycle. All the things I'd ignored while pouring my life into someone else's dream. "Yes," I said, "effective immediately." There was a pause, then the sound of keys again. "Done," she said. "The transfer has been canceled. You'll see the change reflected in your next statement. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" I smiled for the first time in weeks. "No," I said softly, "that's everything. Blank. Underscore. Blank." When I hung up, the silence in my house felt different. Not empty, peaceful. Outside, the December sky was turning gray. The world was moving on. Busy with Christmas shopping, family dinners, laughter. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel left out. I felt free. I gathered every document from that folder, every piece of paper that told the story of my misplaced loyalty, and walked to the fireplace. The match hissed softly as it caught flame. I watched the edges curl, the ink blacken, the paper turn to ash. 5 years of sacrifice vanished in a quiet blaze. The firelight danced across the photo of Maria on the mantel. She was smiling, that same gentle smile, the one that always seemed to say, "You know what to do now." Blank. Underscore. Blank. My phone buzzed again. I didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. Probably Michael, or worse, Isabella, calling to ask for a favor, to smooth things over, to pretend none of this had happened. I let it ring. Instead, I opened the cabinet and reached for the bottle of good whiskey, the one I'd been saving for a special occasion. Tonight felt special enough. I poured myself a glass and raised it toward Maria's picture. "To freedom," I whispered. The burn down my throat felt righteous. Blank. Underscore. Blank. As the fire settled to glowing embers, I thought about the years I'd spent living for other people's comfort. The late nights working overtime. The pride I swallowed every time Isabella looked at me like I was something stuck to her shoe. The countless ways I'd tried to buy acceptance. And for what? To be told I wasn't welcome at a dinner I had literally paid for? Not anymore. That night, I slept soundly for the first time since Maria's funeral. No guilt, no anxiety about bills or transfers or demands. Just silence, warm, earned silence. In that stillness, I realized something profound. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It doesn't need to shout or break things. It just needs to stop feeding the wrong people. Blank. Underscore. Blank. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The air smelled like smoke and clarity. For the first time in years, I brewed good coffee, real Colombian beans. Not the store-brand bitterness I'd forced myself to settle for. Each sip tasted like a promise that my life, from this point on, would be mine again. The phone rang around mid-morning. Isabella's name flashed on the screen. I almost laughed. Dennis. Her voice snapped the moment I answered. I need you to pick up my parents from the Spokane airport this afternoon. Their flight lands at 2. Alaska Air, Carousel 3. I blinked slowly, almost amused. Did you forget our conversation yesterday? I asked. Look, she said sharply, whatever that was about, we need to focus on practical matters now. You're the only one available. Just do it. Her words rolled over me like water over stone. And for the first time, I realized she had no idea I'd change. Of course, I said calmly, I'll take care of everything. Good, she replied, not even bothering with a thank you. And Dennis, wear something decent. My parents notice details. When she hung up, I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. I checked the clock. 10:52 a.m. Plenty of time before the 2 p.m. flight. I poured myself another cup of coffee, turned a page in the newspaper, and whispered to the quiet room. Let's see how they handle being stood up for once. At 2:15 p.m., I wasn't anywhere near the airport. Instead, I was sitting in my recliner, a warm mug of Earl Grey in hand, the newspaper folded neatly on my lap. The house smelled faintly of coffee and pine from the candle I'd lit that morning, one of the few small luxuries I'd finally allowed myself. Outside, snow clouds were gathering over Spokane, but inside, everything was calm. It had taken 5 years, but I'd finally learned that peace doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from letting go of people who use your kindness as currency. My phone buzzed on the table. Isabella's name flashed on the screen. I let it ring. Then again, and again. By 2:47, a text popped up. Dad, where are you? My parents are waiting at the airport. I smiled and set the phone face down. The tea was still hot, and the crossword puzzle wasn't going to finish itself. 3:15, another call, then another. I could picture it so clearly, Cody and Catherine Jenkins standing in their designer coats at baggage claim, scanning the crowd for a man they thought was still obedient enough to jump when they snapped their fingers. I imagined their confusion turning to irritation, then to anger, then to panic. For once, the discomfort was theirs to carry, not mine. I took another slow sip of tea. It tasted better than any apology I could have given. By 3:45, the phone had rung 6 times. I'd finished the crossword, the sports section, and even organized the junk drawer, something I hadn't done in years. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you stop running around trying to make ungrateful people happy. At 3:47, the screen lit up again, an unfamiliar number this time. Probably the airport payphone. Or maybe a borrowed cell. I didn't answer. Instead, I got up, stretched, and walked to the window. The winter light was fading, painting the sky in streaks of pale gold. Across the street, my neighbor was hanging Christmas lights with his kids. Their laughter drifted through the air, honest and bright. That's what family is supposed to sound like, I thought, not manipulation disguised as love. By 5 p.m., I'd made myself a grilled cheese sandwich and a bowl of tomato soup, comfort food I hadn't had in years. Every bite tasted like independence. The phone buzzed again. I turned it face down, then finally switched it off. Silence. Beautiful, complete silence. Outside, the last of the sunlight disappeared. Somewhere across town, 3 very entitled people were probably arguing with an airport taxi driver about the fare. I almost laughed out loud. Let them figure it out. The pounding started around 6 p.m. Not a knock, a pound, sharp, angry, unrelenting, the kind of sound that makes the doorframe tremble. I didn't even flinch. I knew exactly who it was. When I opened the door, I was greeted by 3 furious faces, red, cold, and trembling. Cody Jenkins shoved his way past me before I could even speak. His face was blotched with rage, his expensive wool scarf twisted awkwardly around his neck. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted. "We waited at that goddamn airport for over 3 hours." Behind him came Catherine, her hair disheveled, her perfect lipstick smudged. "This is completely unacceptable behavior. Dennis, barbaric." And then Isabella, her coat wrinkled, her eyes wild. "You humiliated us. Do you have any idea what you've done?" My parents had to take a taxi. A $40 taxi. I closed the door behind them and leaned calmly against it. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. The room went still. Cody's eyes bulged. "Excuse me?" I said. I repeated, my voice even. "Get out of my house." "Listen here," he barked, jabbing a finger toward my chest. "You don't get to make demands here, buddy, not after what you pulled today." "This is my house," I said, stepping closer. "You are trespassing. Leave." Catherine scoffed, her voice dripping with venom. "Dennis, you clearly don't understand who you're dealing with. My husband has connections all over this city, business, social, political. You can't treat people like us this way and expect to get away with it." I smiled. The kind of smile that only comes when you know something they don't. "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "This was a lesson." Cody blinked. "A what?" "A lesson about arrogance," I replied, "and about what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." Isabella laughed bitterly. "Who do you think you are? Some kind of philosopher now? You're nothing but a washed-up old man with a truck and an ego." I nodded slowly. "Maybe, but I'm also the man who stopped paying your mortgage." That shut her up. Catherine frowned. "What did you just say?" I said. I continued. "Those monthly payments you've been enjoying, the ones keeping this little empire afloat, they ended yesterday." Cody's face went from red to pale. "You wouldn't dare." "I already did." The silence that followed was delicious. Cody clenched his fists. "You have no idea who you're messing with, old man. I know people who can make your life miserable." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It's a promise," he hissed. Catherine added sharply, "Actions have consequences, Dennis, public ones." I stepped closer until my voice was barely above a whisper. "Then you'd better be ready for yours." They turned to leave, muttering and fuming. Isabella threw one last glare at me before slamming the door behind her. I stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of their footsteps fading down the driveway. Then, quiet again. Pure, perfect quiet. The next morning, I made coffee like I always did. The sun rose slow and golden over Spokane. For the first time in years, I didn't dread what the day might bring. But peace is never free, not when you've embarrassed people who live off reputation. 3 days later, I opened my newspaper and nearly dropped my mug. There it was, my own face on page 3 of the Spokane Review. The headline read, "Local businessman abandons elderly couple at airport during holiday storm." I froze. The photo was an old one from my company website, me, smiling politely in a suit I hadn't worn since Maria's funeral. Below it, paragraphs of lies. Cody and Catherine Jenkins, visiting their daughter for Christmas, were stranded for over 4 hours when family member Dennis Flores failed to appear for their scheduled pickup. "We couldn't believe someone would abandon us like that," said Cody Jenkins, a retired banking executive. "At our age, that kind of behavior isn't just inconsiderate, it's dangerous." Dangerous. The temperature that day had been 52 degrees and sunny. No mention of their insults. No mention of being banned from Christmas. No mention of the years of financial support that had kept their perfect lives standing. Just me, painted as some cruel, unstable old man who'd lost his mind. I set down my coffee and read it again. Then again. Each time, the same calm grew in me, the kind that comes right before a storm. They'd declared war. But they'd forgotten something very important. I'd built my life from nothing. And I knew exactly how to rebuild it, one move at a time. I folded the newspaper neatly, placed it on the table, and said to the empty room, "All right, you want to play games? Let's play. The morning I saw that article, something in me changed. Not the way anger used to burn, wild and useless, but a colder kind of clarity. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't break, doesn't beg. It just plans. For 3 days, I stayed quiet. No phone calls, no emails, no explanations. If they wanted to paint me as the villain, fine. I'd give them a story worth remembering. I sat at my old wooden desk, the same one where Maria used to balance our household bills. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, striping the papers in gold. I unfolded the newspaper one more time, studying the article with a pen in hand. Each sentence was a lie, polished and deliberate. Each quote was a dagger. A pattern of erratic behavior. Possible signs of cognitive decline. Family concerns about his mental state. I circled every phrase and wrote a single word beside it in red ink. False. Then, at the bottom of the page, I wrote something else. They wanted war. They got it. I powered on my old laptop, the one covered in dust from years of disuse. Google opened slowly, as if the internet itself hesitated to see what I was about to do. I typed in the first name, Cody Jenkins. There he was, retired bank executive, treasurer of the Inland Northwest Business Leaders Association, and proud member of the Spokane Country Club. Dozens of photos of charity events, ribbon cuttings, business luncheons. Smiling, polished, fake. Every one of them would soon look different. Next, Katherine Jenkins. Her Instagram looked like a magazine spread, champagne glasses, pearls, vacation selfies at Coeur d'Alene. Every post tagged with hashtag blessed life and hashtag grateful heart. A gallery of pretentious lies funded by my hard-earned money. And then Isabella Flores. Her Facebook was a scrapbook of hypocrisy. Photos of her beautiful home, the one I'd paid for. Pictures of a brand new car during the same month she'd told me they were struggling. Status updates bragging about Christmas dinner preparations, our Christmas dinner. The one I wasn't good enough to attend. But it was Michael's LinkedIn that stopped me cold. His latest activity showed a new connection, Patricia Morrison, lifestyle editor at the Spokane Review. The same woman who wrote the hit piece about me. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. There it was, the missing link. Cody hadn't just called in a favor, he'd used his old banking network to plant the story. To destroy my reputation before I could fight back. But they'd made a critical mistake. They underestimated the man who built his life brick by brick, dollar by dollar, with no one to bail him out. I started a new document on my computer. The title: Timeline of Financial Support, Flores to Jenkins Family. One by one, I laid it out like evidence in a courtroom. Down payment on the house, $47,000, from my home equity loan. Kitchen renovation, $18,000, charged to my personal credit card. 60 mortgage payments, $2,800 each, totaling $168,000. Miscellaneous support, utilities, repairs, vacations, furniture, roughly $25,000. Total, $258,000. $250,000. And what had they given me in return? An empty chair at Christmas and a headline in the local paper. I spent the next 2 days building my case. Bank statements, receipts, screenshots of social media posts flaunting luxuries I had unknowingly financed. Even text messages where Isabella asked for a little help while tagging herself at luxury restaurants. By the time I was done, my dining table looked like a crime scene. A paper trail of greed, entitlement, and betrayal. I printed 12 copies of everything. One for each guest they'd invited to their Christmas dinner. If they wanted to destroy my name publicly, I'd return the favor, not with lies, but with truth. I checked Isabella's Facebook again. Her latest post read, "So excited for Christmas dinner with family and friends. Can't wait to show off our home and hosting skills." Perfect. A full guest list, already announced to the world. I circled the date on my wall calendar, December 24th. Christmas Eve. Not a day of revenge. A day of truth. That night, I went to my closet and pulled out my navy blue suit, the one I'd worn to Maria's funeral. It still fit, barely. As I brushed the dust off the shoulders, I whispered to her picture on the mantel, "You'd tell me to let it go, wouldn't you?" Her smile, frozen in that photograph, seemed to say otherwise. The next morning, I called an old friend, a retired paralegal named Jim who used to help me with business contracts. "Dennis?" he said, surprised. "Haven't heard from you in a while." "I need a favor," I replied, "just a quick look at some documents." He chuckled. "Sounds serious." "It's not serious," I said, "it's overdue." 2 hours later, I was sitting across from him at a diner near downtown Spokane. Sliding the manila folder across the table, he flipped through the paperwork, his expression shifting from curiosity to disbelief. "You've been paying their mortgage?" he asked. "For 5 years. He whistled low. "That's generous." "Stupid," I corrected. He looked at me for a long moment. "And what are you planning to do with all this?" I smiled faintly. "Tell the truth, loud enough that even their money can't drown it out." That night, I placed everything back into the folder and set it on my kitchen counter. For years, I'd been invisible, the man behind their luxury, the silent benefactor whose existence was an inconvenience. But not anymore. They wanted a public story. They wanted to show Spokane that Dennis Flores was broken and bitter. Fine. I'd show Spokane who Dennis Flores really was, the man who refused to be erased. I stood by the window, watching snow fall under the glow of the streetlights. It was quiet, peaceful, the calm before the storm. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a victim waiting to be pitied. I felt like a man preparing for justice. 7 days until Christmas. 7 days until I walked through the door of the house I'd built for them, not as a guest, but as the reckoning they never saw coming. I turned off the lights, poured myself one last drink, and whispered to the dark, "Merry Christmas, Isabella, you're about to learn what family really means." Christmas Eve came to Spokane wrapped in quiet snowfall, the kind that makes the world look softer than it really is. For most people, it was a night of warmth, laughter, and family. For me, it was a night of justice. I woke early, the cold air sharp against my skin, and brewed a pot of strong coffee. The house smelled rich and alive, different from the stale loneliness I'd lived in for years. I laid everything out on the table, 12 neatly stacked packets. Each one told the same story. 5 years of payments, receipts, bank transfers, screenshots. Proof that every inch of the Jenkins Flores household, from the granite countertops to the imported Christmas ornaments, had been built on my sacrifice. At the top of each packet, I clipped the article from the Spokane Review, my handwriting scrawled across the margin. Every lie deserves its truth. I buttoned my navy blue suit, the one Maria loved, and stared into the mirror. The man looking back wasn't broken anymore. He wasn't begging to belong. He was calm, steady. The kind of man who'd finally learned that silence has power, but the truth spoken at the right moment can move mountains. By 6:30 that evening, I was parked across the street from their house in Kendall Yards. The driveway glowed with expensive cars, the windows spilling golden light onto the snow. Laughter echoed faintly through the frosty air. Through the curtains, I saw Isabella moving gracefully between guests, wine glass in hand, flashing that polished smile she used when she wanted to look generous. Michael stood beside her, nodding, pretending everything in his world was perfect. It was almost poetic. I checked my watch, 6:45. Perfect timing. The house was unlocked, of course. Isabella liked to boast about how safe their neighborhood was, no need for keys in paradise. She used to say, paradise was about to have its first visitor from reality. The warmth of the house hit me as soon as I stepped inside. The scent of roasted turkey, the hum of Christmas music, the sound of glasses clinking. I followed the laughter into the dining room. 12 people sat around a table dripping in silver and candlelight. Catherine was telling a story about a charity auction. Cody was mid-laugh. Isabella was radiant in red silk. For a second, no one noticed me standing there, the ghost of the man they'd erased. Then silence fell. Forks froze. Eyes widened. "Good evening," I said, setting my briefcase on the marble sideboard. "I hope you don't mind if I join your celebration." "Dennis," Isabella stammered, her voice tight, "this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave right now." "Actually," I said, my tone calm, almost conversational, "I think your guests deserve to hear something first." A woman in pearls, one of Catherine's charity friends, I guessed, leaned forward curiously. "What's this about?" I opened the briefcase and began placing packets in front of each guest. "This," I said, "is the truth." The sound of rustling paper filled the room as 12 sets of eyes moved down the pages. Bank statements. Checks. Wire transfers. Photos of the very countertops their wineglasses rested on, labeled, "Paid by Dennis Flores." Whispers rippled through the table. "This can't be right," one man muttered. Another gasped softly, "Isabella, you didn't tell us." She stood abruptly. "He's lying. He's having some kind of episode." "Episode?" I smiled. "Funny word, almost like the one your father used when he called me unstable in the newspaper." Cody shifted uncomfortably. Catherine's lips pressed thin. I pulled a folded newspaper from my briefcase and placed it beside the turkey platter. "Recognize this?" A man in a gray sweater glanced between the paper and Cody. "Wait, you mean that article about the airport thing? That was him?" "Yes," I said simply. "It was me. The man who supposedly abandoned 2 helpless elders in a blizzard. The same man who's been paying their daughter's bills for 5 years." The room went still. Catherine found her voice first. "Dennis, you're exaggerating. You offered that money. It was a gift." "Was it?" I asked quietly. "A gift doesn't come with humiliation. A gift doesn't end with your name dragged through the newspaper because you refused to play servant anymore." Isabella's composure cracked. "You don't understand. You were helping family." I stepped closer, my eyes never leaving hers. "Family doesn't ask for help, then ban the hand that fed them from Christmas dinner because they're not refined enough." A murmur spread through the guests. Someone whispered, "This is unbelievable." "Oh, it's believable," I said. "You've all been eating dinner in the house I bought. You're sitting under lights I paid for, drinking wine from glasses my money bought, surrounded by people who thought I wasn't good enough to sit at this table." Michael finally spoke. His voice was small, trembling. "Dad, please." I turned to him. "You didn't know about the article, did you?" He hesitated. His silence was an answer. "She knew," I said, pointing toward Isabella, "and her parents helped plant it." The woman in pearls spoke again, her tone cold now. "Cody, tell me that's not true." Cody's face had gone pale. "This is completely out of context." "Context?" I laughed softly. "Let's add some. The day you printed lies about me. It was 52 degrees outside. No snowstorm. No danger. Just 2 self-proclaimed elites furious that I'd stopped being their personal chauffeur." The woman's expression hardened. "So, you slandered him?" Catherine snapped. "You don't know the full story." "Oh, I think we do," said another guest quietly, flipping through the bank statements. The tension thickened. The perfect dinner tableau had turned into a courtroom. And for once, the jury wasn't on their side. "You humiliated us," Isabella whispered, trembling with anger. "How could you do this?" I leaned forward slightly, voice steady as stone. "No, Isabella, you humiliated yourselves. I just brought the receipts." A chair creaked. Someone stood. Then another. Conversations erupted around the table, sharp, judgmental, disbelieving. Catherine tried to speak over the noise. "Everyone, please." But the spell was broken. Their carefully curated image shattered right there under the chandelier I'd paid for. I closed my briefcase and straightened my tie. "Enjoy the rest of your dinner," I said, heading toward the door. "It's the last one I'll ever pay for." Behind me, voices rose, confusion, fury, shame. Cody shouting something about defamation. Isabella crying. Guests whispering as they realized they'd been dining on a lie. Outside, snowflakes drifted softly through the quiet air. I breathed in deep. The cold never felt so clean. As I walked toward my truck, The sound of their chaos faded into the distance. It was the most beautiful Christmas music I'd ever heard. The morning after Christmas was silent. The kind of silence that follows a storm, not peace, but the stunned quiet of something permanently changed. I stood on my porch, coffee steaming in my hands, watching the neighborhood slowly wake. Somewhere far away, church bells rang faintly, but they didn't sound like redemption. They sounded like aftermath. For the first time in years, I didn't feel regret. I felt closure. Inside, my phone buzzed nonstop, texts, voicemails, missed calls, all from Michael. I didn't answer. By noon, I couldn't resist curiosity. I opened the local paper. There it was. Page 1. Again. But this time, the headline was different. Community power couple embroiled in holiday scandal, private allegations surface. Beneath it, a photograph of Cody and Catherine Jenkins looking distinctly less glamorous than before. The article detailed rumors of financial impropriety and credible allegations of manipulation toward a local businessman. My name wasn't mentioned directly. It didn't need to be. People knew. Spokane wasn't a big city. Gossip traveled faster than light. Within a day, the perfect public image they'd built over decades began to crack. Catherine withdrew from her charity board. Cody took a leave of absence from his business association. Their friends stopped returning calls. The same people who'd toasted their sophistication were now whispering behind closed doors. Justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes, it comes from the court of reputation. Isabella's downfall came faster. Her social media accounts went private overnight. Her friends unfollowed her in droves. The sponsors who once sent her free products for her influencer posts suddenly disappeared. And Michael, poor, naive Michael, was caught in the middle of the wreckage. At first, I imagined him pacing their perfect kitchen, watching his world collapse one news notification at a time. I imagined him realizing that the empire he'd built on borrowed money and borrowed pride had been nothing more than a fragile illusion. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for him. But another part, the part that had eaten peanut butter sandwiches for 5 years so his wife could buy designer handbags, told me he needed this. He needed to learn what loss really felt like. By the second week of January, the calls slowed down. Then they stopped entirely. Life in my little house was quiet again, but it wasn't lonely. I started fixing things I'd neglected for years. I repainted the living room, repaired the porch light, bought groceries that didn't come in bulk discount cans. Every small act of self-care felt revolutionary. And sometimes, at night, I'd pour a glass of whiskey and sit by the fire, thinking of Maria. Her laughter, her patience, the way she'd squeeze my hand when I doubted myself. I'd whisper, "I did it, Maria." And in the flicker of the flames, I almost believed she heard me. 3 months passed. Spring began to thaw the edges of winter, and life in Spokane returned to its normal rhythm. Until one Tuesday morning, when a thick white envelope arrived in my mailbox. Certified mail. From Wells Fargo Mortgage Services. I knew before I opened it what it was. Notice of default. Final demand for payment. I scanned the letter. $8,400 in arrears. 14 days to pay or face foreclosure proceedings. I smiled faintly, not out of cruelty, out of understanding. The house they'd built with my money was now crumbling under the weight of their arrogance. They'd stopped making payments the moment I cut off the transfers, assuming, perhaps, that I'd cave, that guilt would drive me to rescue them again. But guilt was gone. So was the illusion of obligation. For the next few weeks, I ignored the phone calls that followed. Blocked numbers, unknown numbers, even numbers I recognized. I didn't need to hear their apologies. Because apologies don't rebuild trust. They just acknowledge its ruins. Still, I knew, sooner or later, one of them would show up in person. And when it happened, I was ready. It was a Thursday evening in late March. The air was cool, tinged with the smell of rain. I was in my recliner, reading, when I heard a knock on the door. Not pounding this time. A hesitant, broken rhythm. When I opened it, Michael stood there, shoulders slumped, suit wrinkled, eyes hollow. He looked 10 years older. "Dad," he said quietly, "we need to talk." I stepped aside and let him in. He glanced around the living room, noticing the fresh paint, the new furniture, the peace. "Nice place," he said softly. "It's amazing what you can do when you spend your money on yourself." I replied. He sat down slowly, as if afraid the chair might reject him too. "I'm sorry," he began, "about Christmas, about everything." I said nothing. I'd learned the power of silence. He rubbed his face with his hands. "I didn't know about the newspaper. Not until after, when I found out what they said about you." About me," I interrupted. "Or about your mother?" He froze. "I know what they said," I continued, "that Maria knew her place better than I do." His eyes filled with shame. "I should have defended you, both of you. I should have stood up to them years ago." "Yes," I said quietly, "you should have." We sat in silence, the sound of rain against the window filling the space between us. "The house is in foreclosure," he said finally. "I know. We can't make the payments without." He stopped himself, realizing how that sentence ended. "Without me." I let the words hang there, cold and heavy. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "Sell it, maybe. Move somewhere smaller. Isabella's different now, quieter." "Reality has that effect," I said. He nodded. "Dad, I know I don't deserve it. But, can you forgive me?" I looked at him for a long time. The boy I'd raised, the man he'd become. "I forgave you months ago," I said finally. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means I won't let the past control me anymore." He swallowed hard. "So what now?" "Now," I said, standing, "you rebuild. You learn what family means, not the kind you buy, but the kind you earn." He nodded slowly, eyes wet. "I lost you, didn't I?" I shook my head. "You didn't lose me, Michael. You gave me away." After he left, I stood on the porch and watched him drive off into the mist. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just free. The world outside was quiet again. The kind of quiet that means something's been set right. And as I turned back inside, I whispered to the empty room, "Merry Christmas, Maria." Justice came late, but it came. Spring came early that year. The snow melted into the soil like a promise kept, and the first tulips pushed through the dirt by my porch. Their bright colors stood out against the dull wood, small symbols of life returning after a long, hard winter. I spent that morning trimming the hedges, humming to myself. The old radio played soft jazz from the kitchen, and the world, for once, felt right. 3 months had passed since the night I walked into that dinner and set the truth free. The fallout had run its course, and so had I. Cody and Catherine had sold their house in disgrace. Isabella vanished from social circles, her online presence wiped clean like chalk from a board. And Michael, my son, was learning to live with consequences. But me? I was learning to live again. The first Sunday of April, I drove out to visit Rosa, my late wife Maria's younger sister. Her house sat on the edge of town, filled with laughter and the smell of warm tortillas. The moment I walked in, her grandchildren came running. "Uncle Dennis," they shouted, wrapping their little arms around my legs. I laughed, really laughed, something I hadn't done in years. Rosa appeared from the kitchen, flour on her hands and a knowing smile on her face. "You look different," she said, lighter. "Maybe I finally put down a few things I wasn't meant to carry." I replied. She nodded slowly. Maria would have liked that. We ate dinner at a long wooden table, crowded and noisy, plates clinking, conversations overlapping, no marble countertops, no designer wineglasses, just real people, real warmth. At one point, Rosa's husband raised his glass. "To family," he said. The words hit me in the chest, but not like before. Not with pain, with understanding. Because that night, I realized something simple and profound. Family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the people who show up, who make room for you, who want you there, not for what you give, but for who you are. When I got home later that night, the house felt different, not empty, but peaceful. On the mantel sat two photographs. One of Maria, forever smiling in the sunlight. The other, new, me with Rosa's grandkids, their faces lit with laughter. I looked between them and smiled. "We're okay now," I whispered. A week later, an envelope arrived in the mail. It was thin, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a folded letter, from Michael. "Dad. The house is gone. We sold it last month. Isabella's living with her parents for now. I don't know what's next. But I wanted to tell you, I finally understand what you tried to teach me. You weren't trying to buy my success. You were trying to give me stability, a foundation, and I built a prison out of it. I'm sorry for all the years I made you feel small when you were the biggest man I knew. I'm working again, nothing fancy, just construction, feels right, using my hands. Maybe I finally inherited something from you after all. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday we can talk again. Love. Michael." I read it twice, then a third time. The words weren't perfect, but they were real. I placed the letter beside Maria's photo. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't something you say, it's something you live. That weekend, I called him. It rang 3 times before he answered. "Dad?" His voice cracked, uncertain. "Hi, son," I said gently, "I got your letter." Silence, then a shaky breath. "I didn't think you'd call. I didn't think you'd write," I replied, smiling. We talked for an hour. About work, about the weather, about nothing and everything. Not as enemies, not even as father and son trying to repair the past. Just two men finally speaking truth to one another. When we hung up, my heart felt lighter than it had in years. That Sunday, Rosa texted, "Dinner again? The kids are asking for you." I texted back one word. "Wouldn't miss it." That evening, as I drove down the familiar road toward her house, I passed the old bank where I'd signed away my savings for Michael's home. The building stood the same, cold, gray, impersonal. But this time, I didn't feel bitterness. Because I'd built something better than a house, I'd rebuilt myself. After dinner, Rosa's grandson tugged at my sleeve. "Uncle Dennis," he asked, "are you rich?" I laughed. "Why do you ask?" "Because Mama said you used to have lots of money. But you gave it all away." I looked at him for a moment, then smiled. "I used to think being rich meant having money. But now I think it means having peace. Having people who care." He nodded seriously. "Then you're the richest man I know." Later that night, I sat on Rosa's porch as the kids chased fireflies. The world was quiet, but alive, a soft wind carrying laughter through the trees. I thought about Maria, about Michael, about all the pain and the lessons hidden inside it. Justice had come, yes, but what mattered more was what followed: understanding, peace, and the quiet kind of forgiveness that grows like tulips after snow. As the sun dipped low and the air turned cool, I whispered into the twilight, "Thank you, Maria, for everything, for teaching me that real love doesn't demand payment, and real family never needs an invitation." I took one last look at the glowing house behind me, the laughter spilling through the windows, and smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't on the outside looking in. I was home. And that's how Dennis Flores finally found peace, not in revenge, but in truth, forgiveness, and the rediscovery of real family. Sometimes, justice begins with saying no. And sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply living free. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, share it, and subscribe to Revenge in Silence, where every story reminds us that strength often speaks the quietest.